Hello and welcome to Data Conversations over Coffee with myself, Craig Stewart. This is the fourth and final episode in a series I've been doing on ethics in AI. And I've spoken to Nanda in South Africa, Rachel in South Africa, Mark Kane out of the US. And today joining me from the UK is Ganna Pogrebna, who is the lead for behavioral data science at the Alan Turing Institute. Ganna, thank you so much for joining me. How are you this morning?
Thank you. I'm great. Glad to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. Yeah, excited
absolutely.
to be here.
Yeah, good. Absolute pleasure. So first thing I wanted to cover off before we get into a bit of detail, I see from your YouTube channel, you're a Formula One fan, much like myself. What have you made of the season so far? It's been pretty interesting. I don't know who your team is, who your driver is. Mine's Ferrari, so I'm having a pretty woeful season.
Yeah, so we do we do have a YouTube channel with my co-host Patrick Hans. So I think you will get along with Patrick because he's a Ferrari fan. I kind of just really appreciate the sport, and we started this channel just to talk kind of historically about analytics in Formula One, and we started from 1950 and we kind of go I think we're now in year, like we record in year 1957 or 58, something like that, so we haven't yet even finished the 50s. But in terms of being a fan, I think I kind of try to follow great engineering and great analytics, and dependent on that, I'm really sometimes admiring some of the established brands like Ferrari and McLaren, but also I like teams that really experiment with stuff like Williams, for example. So yeah, I mean, it's just a passion in general for me, and I think my preferences change a lot dependent on the season. So I can't say that I've been a fan of one team for kind of a long time.
Okay, yeah, I think at the moment with Ferrari not doing particularly well and Mercedes dominating, I watch more for the technology than for the sort of closely.
I think that's true, and I think also with sort of the show dominating the sport a little bit. We know that cars now go faster, and sometimes they tell you, oh, today we have a new record, so we're, I don't know, whatever, three quarters of a second faster than we used to be last year. But you surely know when you watched it in, like, I don't know, 1990s, that it was a lot more exciting, right? And I think it has to do with the fact we're too much into kind of the show now, like how it's viewed and how we can show it from different angles rather than the actual sport of it. But I mean, I think this is just a phase, so I'm sure that the sport will survive and there will be a kind of a new phase soon. So we'll see something else. Yeah, I mean, actually for this year, we saw quite an interesting trend with all this kind of simulated rides, and we see kind of Amazon is doing some other things with kind of simulated driving, simulated racing. This is certainly really cool, and from analytics perspective as well. And like we've done some work on Formula One in terms of understanding why, for example, Mercedes is doing so well, and others probably are not doing that well. And yeah, it has to do with the fact, like partly, I mean, obviously there are many factors contributing to a win of the team, but one of these factors is data analytics.
Yeah.
And currently we basically have kind of this information pollution within teams because they get a lot of variables, a lot of observations, a lot of data, and it's hard for them to tell whether this data is actually of interest or adding value in any shape or form. We see that in any sport actually, but particularly in Formula One because it's so overwhelmingly data driven. We have, I don't know, over 200 or sometimes more sensors on a car. on average. And yeah, so I just, so basically what we found through research is that the teams who are very good at innovating on the modeling side, how they analyze data, what variables they take as a kind of important variables for performance is extremely important. So these teams who make good choices and who innovate quickly on analytics side actually tend to do better.
Okay.
So there you go.
Good insight. So anybody watching that thinks they can take the data of Ferrari and find out the right model and the right prescriptive analytics to use to help them get better, please reach out to me or reach out to us.
I think Ferrari is doing well. Like Ferrari in general are doing well because they do innovate. So probably what you see is they are kind of innovating mid-season, and maybe they just haven't arrived at kind of the next stage.
Yeah.
So we will see this ups and downs. So like, for example, one of my favorite kind of teams of all times was Lotus. I mean, not in the kind of current reincarnation, but like, back in the 70s, for example, if you look at this team, and Lotus was dominating the sport for many years. It was a lot kind of performing a lot better than Ferrari, for example, and yet you still see Ferrari survive. So my point is, you often can have in Formula One, you often can have this newcomers who are fast and furious and do some innovative stuff, and they're really cool and they look good for a few years, but at the end of the day, this well-established brands, because they do things systematically, they do things with kind of a lot of thinking in mind, they always try to figure out the right incentives, they survive, and they do some they always find this new kind of rebirth, and do something interesting the next season. So like, yeah, my advice is just have patience. They will be okay. Ferrari will be okay. They will show something cool in next season, or we will see some great rides from Ferrari, I'm sure.
Right, perfect. That makes me feel a bit better. Let's move on a bit. Not everyone is fanatical about Formula One, like myself, like you. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the Alan Turing Institute, just to give some context to people. I think many people will know of Alan Turing, quite a famous figure, mathematician, code breaker, if you will. Obviously, there was a lot of personal sort of issues and scandals and sort of conspiracies around everything that happened. Let's not talk about that, but maybe just give us a bit of insight into what the Institute actually does.
Yeah, gladly. I mean, not only, Alan Turing is an iconic figure that I'm sure a lot of people heard about him, but also I can share with you kind of my personal victory and the victory of the Institute, and in fact the victory for the entire kind of British nation, is that I forgot the exact year when it's coming. I think it's next year, but maybe I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. We will actually have a 50-pound note with Alan Turing on it.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, I'm not sure whether we will use notes by that time, but we do, like, he will be actually on British on British currency.
Yeah.
So so the thing is, the thing about the institute is a national center for of excellence for data science and artificial intelligence, and originally it was kind of an institute that was set up as a center of excellence between just 5 universities. And the 5 founding universities were Oxford, Cambridge, UCL, University of Warwick, and University of Edinburgh. In 2018, we saw a kind of a big expansion of the institute. So now it includes 13 universities in the UK. And it just became a lot bigger and a lot stronger. And I think it is basically a locus of talent, like data science talent in the UK. Where people are working on all sorts of things, from data-centric engineering, which is quite a traditional field, kind of to things like artificial intelligence and art. So how can, you know, artificial intelligence write music or, you know, engage in creative writing and things like this. So yeah, so all these things are of interest to fellows of the Institute. I just want to say that if you go to the website of the Alan Turing Institute, the Alan Turing Institute itself is based in British Library, and a lot of people think that, oh, you have to be a fellow to engage. This is, of course, not correct, because a lot of events at the Alan Turing Institute are open to public. All you need to do is register. So it's not a closed club. So by all means, if you have an opportunity to you know, browse the internet and just check out the webpage, you will find a lot of interesting things. And like I said, there are many programs, there are 9 programs. And we have people who are interested in ethics. We have people who are interested in smart cities. We have people who are interested in digital twins. Lots and lots and lots of things. So yeah, so do check it out. And like I said, the majority of events are open to public. So by all means, attend some seminars and workshops and masterclasses.
Yeah, great. So anybody wants to check that out, go to the website, which is Turing, turing.ac.uk. I've got it open up here.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Right.
So Ganna, maybe tell us then a bit about your role within all those sorts of areas at the Institute. So you're the lead for behavioral data science, and a lot of people that are watching the show are very interested in data science and their corporate application. So what is it that your role actually entails?
Yeah, so basically, I was trained as a decision theorist. So my original training was something between economics and psychology. So if you heard about behavioral science, that's kind of what I used to do. But from about 2013, I started to work with engineers, and my work became more and more kind of data scientist, and I started to use large data sets, and I understood that actually, you know, the models that I used to write and test in the lab with a handful of people work quite well with a lot of people. And that kind of is a really exciting area for me. So my personal research at the moment is on hybrid models. So I try to understand how we take artificial intelligence models and merge them with behavioral science models, which is really cool. And luckily, there are quite a few people who are interested in the same thing. And we have a group.
Yeah.
And it's called Behavioral Data Science. So generally, behavioral data scientists come from different walks of life. So we have people who come from engineering or hard sciences, so-called hard sciences like mathematics, statistics. We also have social scientists like myself who came from, you know, psychology, economics, or other social sciences, and eventually kind of got into more math and more technology and data. And then we also have people who come from neuroscience and biology, and who also look more at systems, you know, and so that's another strand. And then we also have engineers, so engineers who work on human behavior. So it's a very diverse group, but essentially the point of this whole behavioral data science as a strand of data science is to look at human behavior, algorithmic behavior, and systems behavior. So there are these 3 large strands, and that's what we're interested in. So I think there is a tendency, I mean, I saw several articles on, you know, various social media where people confuse behavioral data science and business analytics. I mean, we do a little bit of business analytics sometimes, but actually we're interested in the bigger picture. So we're interested in how do we model humans, how do we model algorithms, how do we model systems that involve humans and algorithms. And most importantly, how do we make sure that the algorithms that we build are based on, you know, these human values that we have? So how do we make them more valuable to individuals who are using these algorithms and who are using this technology?
Yeah. Okay, so I think that's quite interesting there. I mean, human behavior is really, for me, kind of at the crux of the ethics conversation when it comes to AI, because it's not a a perfect machine building or developing these algorithms. It's all developed by humans themselves who have different ways of behaving. They have different values or different sort of take a different take on what value is, what fairness is, etc. So, what are you seeing from an ethics point of view in AI, where you're actually building that sort of human behavior but also making sure that it doesn't come out as malicious or negative or racist or whatever it may be? Because I think that must be quite challenging. You want it to be sort of humanized, but not something where it's going to go off track.
Right. So I told you before before we started the conversation, I'm not really an ethicist. So please, if you guys are listening to this, make a discount for that. So I normally approach it as a person who designs technology, and writes algorithms. So for me, ethics is an extremely important subject, and not only ethics, but also kind of this the nature of this work in terms of ethics and law. So what is legal, what is ethical? Because obviously what is ethical often lies in kind of your personal values as well, not only societal values, but what is legal is normally very precise and well defined, right? So if we talk about algorithms, I think for me the most important question, and this is something that I also discovered talking to people in data science, who are working in designing algorithms, is the important question is, am I causing any harm? And I think this is the most important question that everybody who is designing algorithms should be asking. And equally, when you are using a technology, you need to think, okay, what is the risk here? What harms could this technology potentially entail? Because if we take for example, Facebook, which is a very controversial company at the moment, with lots and lots of horrible things that happened on kind of ethical side with technology that they offered. When this company started, it was it had really fantastic goals of just connecting people, and I don't think anybody could have anticipated that it could become, I don't know, a threat to democracy, for example, that people's votes would be affected by what they see on Facebook. So yeah, to me, I think these are central questions. But what I also would like to emphasize is that a lot of times when people talk about what is ethical and what is good and what is bad, they normally mention biases that algorithms have, and very often it's horror stories. A lot of people are trying to sort of generate fear that this shouldn't be algorithmic, that shouldn't be algorithmic, and I kind of share that, because I think yes, indeed there are risks, but I am completely against the view that we should scare people, and tell them horror stories. We should learn from these stories, and we should explain to people what risks there are, and how you can potentially alleviate or decrease the amount of risk that you are taking. So so that we could still enjoy some of the benefits of technology without kind of banning it altogether. So I think that is an extremely important conversation that not many people have. So normally you're just kind of scared of what could happen potentially.
Yeah. So you talk about that main question being, am I causing harm? And maybe harm to some people is slightly different to other people, and some of it is quite clear and obvious. But if you've got one person building a model, how do they kind of really think about sort of what harm they could be causing, because as I said, it may not come into their frame of reference, or it might be slightly different to them. Does it then mean that, you know, data models should be built by teams of diverse people to make sure that, you know, everything can be covered? What sort of tips can you give to people who are starting to build models and thinking, okay, let me ask that really important question, you know, am I causing harm?
I think that's, you know, a lot of times this is sort of personal, just personal intuition. That's one. And second, I tend, you know, I made the habit of talking to lawyers and ethicists who, you know, some of them are my co-authors now because once we start talking, we write something normally. And so I just think that it always helps to think outside the box and talk to people who are not in your field. Even, you know, even if these people are not like ethicists or lawyers necessarily, you can just go outside of your field and ask what they think about this idea, you know. And that normally helps because you know, there are pieces of technology that like I haven't developed with my co-authors, even we had ideas about them, because we were, you know, we were wondering how this could be used. So the example I can give you is in London we have a big problem with homelessness. I'm sure in Africa that must be as well a big, like in big metropolitan cities that must be a problem as well. But you know, the problem is in London, especially in winter, it's very, very cold. And so we had this idea of you know, writing an algorithm that would identify homeless people in the street, and kind of when we have sub-zero temperatures especially. And then you know, the app will basically warn the workers of the shelters that they need to come out and probably help somebody. Fantastic, benign, you know, goal, very, very pro-social, as you can tell. But when I started talking to other people, they told me, "Oh, have you thought about that? You know, you will have an identification, like probably facial recognition or identification algorithm that would use pictures and will be trained based on like pictures taken of kind of homeless people in the street and all that. Have you thought that it could be used for all sorts of horrible things?" So we have in England this expression "policing on steroids," and other potential dangers. So indeed, and you start thinking about it, and you think, okay, yeah, maybe, you know, maybe I shouldn't do that, because that's just not going to. I mean, the potential dangers kind of are a lot greater than potential benefits for this group of population. And you know, sometimes things do not get developed. Another example that I can give you, and that's I haven't thought about the problem in this case, but so there was an app that, I mean, I wasn't kind of directly involved in the development of it, but like a lot of my colleagues were. And so the idea was to develop an app that would tell people where the stock of food is in different food banks, so that, you know, like in England, there is, even though it's a relatively rich country, we still have quite a few people who are hungry, you know, during the day. And food banks really do help a lot of families in the UK. So the idea of this tech was to give this group of population some warnings of where they could get different types of food. And, you know, again, you think this is like really benign, you know, fantastic idea. But then an ethicist came along and told us, well, you know, this is great, but have you thought about dependencies that you are creating? So essentially what you are doing is you're encouraging, but you may be, I mean, may or may not, that's always a hypothetical. You may or may not potentially encourage people to go to a food bank instead of trying to maybe, you know, work on their education, like finding a job, doing something about kind of getting themselves out of this situation that they're at. So, you know, and these things can only, like, I think they can only come when you are talking to people outside your field. So that's kind of on the research side, but obviously it's completely different when we're talking about a company, right? So in companies, that's yeah. So at the moment, companies decide themselves whatever they think is ethical and unethical, which is extremely dangerous. And you know, the self-regulation, we know self-regulation doesn't work because I mean, you see from time to time what happens and how people's data is being exploited. And we also see that people who are getting exploited, unfortunately, for example, you know, if you're Android user, your data is a lot more out there than if you are an iPhone user, right? And also, like, yeah, so these people are essentially providing this free labor for, you know, large corporations, and especially people in global south are in danger. So we need to consider all these things, and, you know, we need to understand all these things before we do something.
Yeah.
So yeah, so and tackling it in companies, I think, is a major challenge.
Yeah, and I think that some of the companies that I've spoken to have, you know, ethics committees and governance committees that their models have to go through before they can actually go into production and be used. So that at least there's some sort of, you know, controls and stuff. Is it an independent ethics committee? Yes or no? But it's kind of how do you
Yeah.
sort of not police it? I don't think it's the right word, because I think there's a lot of value that
Oversight, yeah, you need oversight of some sort. Yeah, I mean, this is very important problem. I'm actually surprised to hear that there are ethics committees within companies. I have never seen a single, like, I work with quite a few companies, so I'm glad they do exist, as you're saying. So there is some sort of internal oversight. I mean, even if there's, you know, any type of internal oversight, that's already good, because, you know, this is a big step forward. So if you guys have a company and you have an oversight for A/B testing, for example, that's awesome. I think that's fantastic. So yeah, in terms of what you know, how you can address these issues. Yeah. So so one thing is you need I think legal regulation in place. And because, yeah, I mean, unless we have the legal requirement for companies to abide by law and, you know, do certain things, it's highly unlikely that they will engage in this type of behavior. So so yeah, so therefore I think there should be really legal ground for this. And in terms of the actual, yeah, you know, the problem, I guess, with ethics in general is that there is a lot of talk about it. Everybody talks about it. And there is very little practical insight into how would you actually organize it. Like you said, like imagine I have a startup, right? How do I even start thinking about these things? Like, you know, it's very difficult. So yeah, normally kind of lawyers try to play that role in organization. So if you have a compliance officer, so they would be the person to go to. But I think that's, you know, so I saw in terms of practical things, maybe just two, well, actually three options. So the first option that I think is not very realistic at the moment is licensing for this type of work. So if we all kind of obliged to get a license, maybe, I don't know, maybe university degree gives you automatic license because, you know, you should know what you're doing. And yet with Cambridge Analytica case, we saw an academic selling data that was collected for research purposes to a private company, right? And then, yeah, so the second option, so yeah, so licensing, I think, is an option. I'm not convinced that that's the right option. So second option that I myself quite like, and I advocated together with some colleagues, is human rights by design. And the third one is bottom-up trusts, which is also cool, really cool idea, bottom-up data trusts. So these three things are kind of interest. I can go into detail if you want.
No, I think maybe the bottom-up trust is quite interesting there. I think, you know, the human rights design is self-explanatory in a way, but what do you mean by the bottom-up trust?
Yeah. So just to make us a short footnote on human rights. So human rights, the good thing about human rights is that this is already an accepted framework by many countries, and we have ratified treaties, and we have Universal Convention of Human Rights that is law. It's an international law. So you can build on that, and you can add new digital rights to that, and you can actually think in terms of like when you are designing tech, you could think about how does that comply with these rules and regulations we have internationally. So that's quite good. So bottom-up trust is a really cool idea. So this idea was put forward by Sylvie Delacroix and Neil Lawrence. So Sylvie is an ethicist, and Neil Lawrence is a computer scientist. Both are professors in the UK. And essentially what they suggested is that, people often do not understand how data is used and how data could be combined. So it's very difficult for them for an average person to kind of get their head around this whole problem. So instead of kind of putting these people in charge of their own data, which some people advocated for that, but I agree it's very difficult to engage everybody. So instead of doing that, you would have a trust, an organization that manages your data on your behalf. This could be a private organization. For example, it could be your bank. You already trust your bank with a lot of your personal data. So, instead of having just your account, they could also be, your data trust, and a custodian to the system. And then they could, for example, instead of you giving out your data for free to Google, your bank could negotiate with Google on your behalf and get some, I don't know, discounts, some other things, some benefits for your data. So that's one possibility. A second possibility is you can have consumer organizations that look after the consumer rights. And these guys, so this is kind of like, people like you and me, we could organize a trust and say, well, we can essentially take care of your rights, and then we will negotiate on your behalf. So that could be even as simple as that. So it could be a community organized project. So I find that extremely realistic. So especially when we talk about companies, large companies like banks, who are really interested in preserving customer data, they would also be interested in delivering some value to them. So I think that's quite realistic. And we do have, I don't know about what you guys have in Africa. I'm sure you do have these organizations, but in the UK we have very strong customer organizations. Like we have, for example, which is a company, is organization of customers looking after customer rights. Very, very influential. Or Trustpilot, that's another big international customer organization. So these guys, for example, could, in principle, they have enough weight in industry to be able to make these negotiations. And I think, that's kind of the realistic things that I saw. So the bottom line is, I think, to me, I would like to see more of a, less chit chat about how important it is, and more of a practical things. What do we do about it? Yeah,
absolutely. Well, if anybody's got any ideas on that, or in South Africa, of organizations, pop it into the comments, and we can start the conversation on that. Ganna, we've only got a few minutes left, but I wanted to kind of track back a little bit into maybe your closing sort of thoughts or remarks. Is that there's a lot of the drive towards AI for social good, social upliftment. As you've talked about, you've got the food banks, there's the homelessness, but a lot of it seems to be getting blocked in a way by ethics. And I'm not suggesting that the ethics goes out of it, but is there sort of this, is it slowing down the social benefit AI potentially has, because there's so many ethical considerations that need to be made before you actually can deploy a model or technology like that?
I think there is like we started with Formula One, so I'm gonna make a nice parallel with Formula One. So in Formula One, as in data analytics, it's very similar. In Formula One, you know how to make a car very very fast, right? But you need to be sure that this is safe for the driver and safe for everybody else around. So you do need rules and regulations that they do inhibit innovation. Do they inhibit innovation? Of course they inhibit innovation, but are they necessary? Of course they're necessary, right? So we know like at the earliest in the early days of Formula One, have like people died on track for no good reason, because there were like not a simple barrier, for example, separating cars from the audience. So and in that sense, indeed, I think that sometimes it is necessary to stop certain things. But I think that what we need to do is we need to clearly identify the risk. So people say it's not always possible. I would disagree with that. I think probabilistically you always can more or less estimate what what type of, at least from known risks. Of course, if you don't know that you have a risk, it's difficult. But you can estimate the propensity of known risks, and you can decide on thresholds when in terms of like stop and go decisions. Is, if we have this amount of risk of kind of loss of personal data or potentially irreversible consequences of a certain technology, then we stop, or we go. So I think this is realistic, and I just want to urge the people from kind of. I want to say to them that the fear, like this fear arguments, are not really the way to go. So we should actually explain the risk. So instead of saying do not engage in this at all, we need to explain to people how they can engage in a safe way and how they can safeguard themselves. For example, we do a lot of stupid things, like I don't know, again, in your scene, but in the UK, very often, if you go to a shop, someone will ask you for your personal data, saying that, oh, would you like I don't know, loyalty card? And they would ask you for your address and postal code and your email address. And a lot of people do give out this information because they do not realize they can simply say no.
Yeah.
Many people do not realize they have an option to say no. I say no to these questions. I say, well, I don't want to give my personal information, in which case the shop assistant normally says, yeah, that's fine. Perfectly okay. So yeah, and I think as long as we, educate people about the fact that there is risk and it's okay, life is risky, and we need to understand better what these risks are. So we need to have constructive conversation about risk instead of just having, telling them horror stories. And in fact, some things should be stopped. I agree with that. But I think that we need to define, as a data science industry, if you will, what are these thresholds beyond which we cannot, we cannot proceed with the project. So I think some precision in that would be really good, and in that sense, this is what is really missing. So that's what we need to do. Not just say, oh, it will end up horribly. If it may end up horribly, but if the probability of it ended up horribly is minuscule, then perhaps we might consider how we can proceed.
Yeah.
Developing that technology.
Ganna, I think that was a great way to finish the series with the Formula One comparison, because in the very first episode of this with Nanda from Standard Bank here in South Africa, he used the analogy of the development of cars and technology in cars, and how it took a while for safety to actually catch up to that. I mean, you didn't have to wear a seatbelt for so long. So I think you're right. Don't stop the development and innovation with AI and data and everything. Just make sure that the safety regulations keep up with the rate of development. Yeah,
definitely. And also, I think for people who are out there who are developers, I would just say to them, just have a kind of an internal barometer of, you know, what you think is right and wrong. And usually you would be right about, you know, your hunch would be the right thing. Because, you know, a lot of people, I feel, they just kind of do it automatically, in a sense, you know, without considering the consequences. But if your internal barometer says that you should not do this, like certain things, then you're probably right, and you shouldn't develop something. But you know, talk to people outside your field, talk to other people who can help you with advice and hopefully help you understand it better, and they will definitely give you some ideas on how you can proceed with it.
Perfect. Thanks. That's great advice to end the show. Ganna, so good to have you on the show. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks a lot. It was a pleasure. And yeah, everybody who is watching us and listening to us, have a great day.